Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's David and we're in the middle of the Terminator challenge. And I will be honest, I am sick of painting miniatures, so let's get back to doing some terrain. Terminator themed of course. This is a Skynet HK flyer. This is a failed print of a Skynet HK flyer. I was halfway doing this when my good daughter decided to get one of these for me as a present, so I never got back to doing anything with this. But that does not mean it is useless. What it does mean is that it is ideal for making terrain with. So we'll do a crashed one of these because it's already in bits. My 3D printer is an old filament style one, it's not one of the new resin ones, so the prints on it do come out a little bit on the rough side. Very first thing I need to do is a reasonable amount of sanding. I'll check in after I've got that done. Let's dive straight in. Okay, so that's the 3D print. I did find more bits to it and assembled them, gave them a sand down, and I've given it a paint job. I didn't attach this engine module to it because that will have come off in the crash. It does look a little bit on the rough and ready side, but at the end of the day it's terrain and it's a crash scene, and you know, we don't mind things like that. I can always, you know, maybe cover that in sand or dirt or something like that. So onto the base. Now this is a piece of spare sheet styrene that I had left over from another project, and I've used that because it is quite thin and I want the profile very close to the ground because basically the ground has been churned up. So rather than using thicker MDF, this is what I have gone for. The construction method for this is going to be very, very similar to the creator tutorial that I did a while ago. I will leave a link for that one up top. But the first thing that I want to do is get the actual crash site for the flyer. Now the good thing about styrene is once you've scored it, it should, with a little bit of work, just snap apart. Now this is going to be a scenery set. So this is going to be the piece for the main crash site, and it will have come sliding in like that. So I'll shape that in a second. But I also want a few other pieces, so let me get, maybe about that, and take about that off there. Next quick thing, because we are going to be applying glue to this and it's quite shiny, I'm just going to give it a rough up with some sandpaper, just so that the glue actually adheres to it. Now what I want to do is mark out the shape that I want the crash site in. Now I just want to tie him up there, so take him out of the bottom. Now this one is going to be basically the skid pattern where it's bounced into it like that. Okay, now that I've got those marked, I'll go and grab my cutting tool and I'll get those shaped out. Cleans off easy enough. Turn a craft knife around it. Get really ragged bits off the edges. That's a wee bit too flash, so just carve that down. So there's one base. I'll do the others. Right, all the pieces have been shaped, and I've also taken sandpaper to the edges. One, just to make sure that all the nasty guff is off there, all the scrap, and also just to smooth the edges down so that it'll sit better on the table and not look so upright. Now, you may be wondering why I've done 4 pieces. So let me lay them out. If you imagine your flyer has come in here like this, bounced and landed, and the engine has come off, what you have there is a set of terrain. it's going to be quite flat, it's going to be quite simple, but the rules in Terminator Genisys do allow for rough ground, which doesn't block line of sight, but it does slope things down when they move across it. So that is what these are going to be, and these will have something like that on them for the actual crash site itself. Now, the next thing that I need to do is use a little bit of foam just to build up some area and get them sitting at an angle. Now, I want him to have come in kind of like this, so I need to pop a little bit of a wedge under like that. Yeah, okay, so he sits at a nice angle. And I'll do the same with the engine here. Trim that one down. There. Right, I will get those glued in place. It is now time for some hot glue work, just to build up the crater edges in the same way that we did with the crater tutorial. And it is just going to be a line of hot glue essentially around the edge. Now, on these sort of teardrop shaped ones, I'm going to taper it out at the back because that would have been shallower as it's come in. And these ones where it's skipped, I don't want to build it up too much. On the crater tutorial, you probably saw that I built it up quite big with it being an actual crater, you know, the bomb blast in the middle. But I don't want that on these because it is, at the end of the day, something different that we are making. These ones, however, the ones where things have actually landed, I am going to build up the front part because if you imagine as the debris has dug in, it's kind of pushed up, and essentially it is going to be kind of, if you imagine it halved like that, okay, that front semicircle, that is where it's going to have been pushed, so that is the place where I am building things up. Now, I am going to deviate a little bit from the crater tutorial. One, I am not going to be applying a coat of tissue paper because I'm going to be using something else, and I'm not going to worry too much about the sort of stone blocks that got thrown up because the boards that I am using these on are essentially just sort of bare dirt in any case. But what I am going to do is smooth the lips of hot glue down using my good old fallback of Reeves coarse texture gel. And of course this will give the glue kind of an undercoat so that any PVA that we use is going to stick to it. And leave that one to dry. Get the others done. So we've got the coarse texture gel around all the lips to blend that hot glue into the bases and give it a bit of a covering so that it'll actually accept PVA a little bit better. The next thing that I want to do is attach this one on here so that I can get more in the way of texture gel on there. So it's going to be there and there and there. Okay, alright, and then I can blend that in and that one will be done. But this beast causes a little bit more of a problem because where the engine will have come off, it is sitting above ground and you've got that sort of stubby bit there which just looks wrong. So what I want to do is build a little collar, pack it out with pipes and girders and things like that so it actually looks as if that engine has snapped off. So I will get on with that and then I will glue this one in place on here. Okay, so collar and a bit of wreckage attached to that. We'll give that a quick paint job. Bright silver. I'm not too worried about the colour matching all that much because there is going to be sort of smoke and battle damage and stuff going on there. I'll just get it vaguely silver so that it kind of blends in with the rest. Now, these two are done and can have sand and grit added. These two are not quite done. I'm going to get this glued into place. And then what I do need to do is on both of these just probably use a wee bit more hot glue to build up the banks around that front edge and certainly around here, get that built up and get that retextured, and then the whole lot can get a sand coat. Okay, so just to recap, I have done extra glue and texture work on the front of those teardrop ones just to build them up and get that sort of pushed area a bit more prominent. And I've also found a few little scraps of metal and I've glued them in place just to give the impression of some armour plates that have scraped off the bottom as it's scraped along the ground. Now we need some texture on here, and I've got the usual mix of watered down PVA with some detergent just to break up the surface area. And I've put an old advertising circular down just to catch the sand. It is straight sand that we're going to be using, and that is for the inside of the craters. So I'll just get a reasonable amount on there and then get a good sprinkling of sand in there. Leave that for a few seconds and then I'll tip the excess out so it can dry, and we'll move on to the next grade of texture. And the last bit of texture just around the edges and up on those rims of the sort of crash craters. We're going to up the coarseness of the material and we're going to go for builder's sand. So let's get a coat of that on, making sure I get right out to the edges. And it doesn't matter whether or not it glues a little bit into the crater, it's just going to give it a sort of less uniform look. So I'm perfectly happy with that. And you can see those bigger grains of sort of gravel in there, and hopefully that should give a nice contrast between the two areas so it really makes it stand out, certainly with the paint job. I'll carry on with the others. Okay, we are on to the painting stages, and the first one is going to be a nice black undercoat because we're just going to do black with a dry brush of light grey. And as ever for terrain, I don't use expensive paint, this is just normal household paint. Now one thing I am going to do, I'm going to select the largest model, is just apply a little bit of black around those broken off edges because I don't want this to suggest damage. And I'll also do a little bit around that tail area where things got blown off, and we'll blend that in as the very last stage. Okay, now because it is going onto a sand base, I'm going to use it really watered down and just allow it to soak in like this. Now normally with an undercoat I would probably be spray painting it, but because I've already applied that chrome finish to the sort of hero part of the model, for want of a better word, that's why I'm doing it by hand. And you can see the way that with it being so watered down, it's actually sort of soaking into the sand and kind of spreading out, which is exactly what I want. It does make the painting far quicker. Okay, that's got that all. I'll do the others and then we'll dry brush this. Almost done. I do like the way they are looking with the undercoat, but it's time for a quick dry brush of light grey. Now one thing, and this is a little bit of a trick, certainly highlighted with these pieces, when you're doing a large area of dry brushing, with the best intention in the world, you're not going to get it even all over. You're always going to get what looks like brush marks. And obviously the shape of that is implying that there has been movement. So because you're going to get brush marks, make sure that you dry brush in the direction of the movement. Otherwise, subconsciously, it's just going to look strange, okay? You can see that it's gone that way, but if you dry brush diagonally like that, it's just going to look wrong, okay? You may not necessarily understand why, but that's just the way it is. Okay, the very final part of painting, just to get some battle damage on the flyer itself. These ones are done. Move them to the side, and this is some cheap acrylic tan paint. I'm going to use a stippling tool. I'm wiping most of it off, but it's a rough edge, and I'm just going to use that around that area where the engine has come off, and a little bit up around there. And then to get a larger area, scouring pad, and I'm using the sponge part. I am just dabbing the paint up and all around, going up a fair way. I did say that earlier we would kind of blend the colours so that there was no dissimilarity between the silver, because essentially we're covering it up. And I am doing this quickly, and I don't mind if it blends together. I'm swapping to grey now, just around there and around that one. And again, you sort of wipe a reasonable amount of it off. in the same way that you would if you were dry brushing. So I'm leaving an amount of the tan and coming down with the grey, and then the last one is a spot of black, and just at the very end. So basically just graduated it down, and you're almost sort of thirding the area that you're doing, and this is just on kind of the final edge parts, and that is that done. It's got to be said that was a nice fun little build to do, and it was something that I needed to get out of my system, get away from painting miniatures and get back to the core business of the channel, which is making terrain. One thing which really did surprise me was the fact that this set had a narrative to it. It added something to the battlefield that showed that things were happening, there were consequences. It's as if it was lived in rather than just a static piece. But the challenge must go on, and I am going to be going back to doing Skynet reinforcements in the next video. So if you want to follow along on the journey, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons and get notifications, because there's going to be another video coming up very, very shortly. So see you back here for that. Bye now.